Board President Gonzalez, you are live.
Thank you. Welcome to the Board of Education meeting. I call the meeting to order. I want to remind those speaking during tonight's meeting that we use closed captioning on the YouTube live stream, so please speak as clearly as possible. We will now move to the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you are able to, I ask you to please stand and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance in English and Spanish. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. Thank you. We will now move on to our acknowledgement of tribal lands. We gratefully acknowledge the Native peoples on whose homelands we gather, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home here today. We'll now move on to agenda item 1.4, which is a moment of silence. So I'll ask for a moment of silence for those who have given their lives in service to their country. Thank you. Next is our roll call. Ms. King, can I have a roll call, please?
Janelle Astorga.
Here.
Ronaldo Tamorita.
Here.
Heather Benavides.
Here.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Here.
Josefina Dominguez. Courtney Jackson.
Here.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Here. Next up is agenda adoption. I'd like to ask for a motion of approval for the adoption of the May 1st, 2024 Board of Education meeting agenda. And I will remind board members that per the APS Board of Education Governance Manual, you can ask that an item be removed from the consent agenda before the meeting agenda is posted, but not during the meeting. Is there a motion for approval?
I move to adopt the May 1st, 2024 Board of Education meeting agenda. This is Courtney.
I'll second. This is Heather.
Thank you. We have a motion from member Jackson and a second from member Dominguez. Ms. King, can we have a roll call? I'm sorry, can we have Benavides? Can we have a vote?
Janelle Astorga.
Yes.
Ronaldo Tamorita.
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Yeah.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes, so the motion carries. Next up is minutes approval, which is agenda item 3.1. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes of the Board of Education meeting on April 17th, 2024?
I'll move for approval of the minutes from the Board of Education meeting on May 1st, 2024, April 17th, 2024.
I'll second. This is Janelle.
Thank you. There's a motion from member Tapia Romero and a second from member Astorga. Ms. King, can we have a vote, please?
Janelle Astorga.
Yes.
Ronaldo Tamorita.
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes. So that carries as well. And next up is public forum. So I will turn it over to Secretary Astorga to share the instructions for public forum.
Thank you. Welcome to our public forum guests. Thank you for being here. When you signed up to speak, you were asked to review rules and expectations, which our presiding officer will enforce. The New Mexico Open Meetings Act requires that our agenda specify in advance the items that will be discussed and voted on during the meeting. Therefore, public forum is not a dialogue among speakers and board members, but rather a chance to hear from our community. We will call participants to speak in the order they signed up, whether in person or virtual. Those here with us tonight will be asked to come to the microphone at the back of the room when their name is called. Online guests will stay in a virtual waiting room until it is their turn to speak. We have set aside 45 minutes for public forum. If there are 22 or fewer speakers, you will have 2 minutes to speak. Otherwise, you will have 1 minute. Tonight, we have 16 speakers. Once your time is up, you will be asked to quickly wrap up. If you feel you're unable to convey your message, you may email boarded@aps.edu. In addition, for those of you here tonight, a representative from our service center is here to assist you. Mr. Gonzalez, please introduce the speakers.
Thank you, board member. Our first speaker this evening is Tamara Romero. Ms. Romero, you have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Tamara Romero. I am the parent of a student at Inez Elementary. We are a transfer family because we love the community aspect of this school. My son is established and he loves his friends and teachers there. I'm asking you to please keep our bell schedule the same as we have this year, which is 8:05 a.m. to 3:35 p.m. We do not use buses, not just the big yellow ones, but also the ones for special ed and homeless families. None of those come to Inez. We are 100% bus free. Our community has changed schedules too many times. This will be the 4th time that it has changed, and it's very difficult for students, staff, and parents to adjust every year. We do not want to have to leave our community because the district insists on changes that don't apply to us. It's not just student turnover that we will have if the schedule is not kept consistent, but good staff as well. This will change the dynamic of our beautiful, diverse, and caring school that we currently have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is in the room, Marcy May. Following Marcy will be Nicholas Porter. Marcy, you have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Thank you so much for time to talk. Pornography affects children, and it affects children in the way that they are changed. And what we saw happen over at Atrisco Heritage High School prom was pornography. I don't care what persuasion you are, but what we saw is adult entertainment being brought into a high school public setting that was supposed to be fun. And I don't know if you saw the faces of some of those children, but they were really uncomfortable because they had somebody twerking. Now, I don't care. Like I said, I don't care what persuasion you are. That has no place. And then we find out that this guy has been doing this in our public schools. Then we wonder why our children cannot learn. As I said, pornography changes a child. And if you give a teenager pornography, he will get addicted. She will get addicted. And then if you give them a chance to see pornography or a math book or history or literature, they will go for the pornography. We are hardwired for that. And you are presenting this information and these ideas to children, and you know that it is addictive. They know, the people that are promoting this, they know that it is addictive. It is destructive and is meant to groom children. I know, because when I was 3 years old, I had pornography in my home, and it was used to groom me, to molest me. I was never the same. And I was never the same after I first saw that, and I was never the same after I was molested. Please, let this crap out of our schools. Our children do not deserve it. They deserve to be protected, and that is your job.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Nicholas Porter, followed by Samantha Penner. Mr. Porter, you have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Board President, member of the board, and superintendent, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Nick Porter, and I'm a parent of 2 children at Inez Elementary School. I also spent 15 years teaching before the stress got too great for me to continue. I say this so that you know that I have great respect for the staff at Inez. Inez is special in many ways. As Principal Casey says, every student at Inez is known, safe, empowered, and inspired. It is a vibrant community, but also one which is stretched very thin. Administration, staff, parents work together to keep Inez the welcoming and productive school that it is. Inez is one of very few schools in the district which is not served by busing. Again, no buses transport students to and from Inez. Inez is a Title I school, a top school, and a community school. As a community school not served by busing, I kindly ask that you, board president, members, and superintendent, allow us to retain the current bell schedule for the next school year. There is no need to change what is working for this already thinly spread but vibrant community. Many students and parents from Inez have written letters to the school board and district leadership and received word back that busing is dictating the schedule. We anticipate that many families and staff members will leave Inez if the proposed bell schedule goes into effect next year. As busing is not a factor at Inez, please use your power to do the right thing and allow this community to have the influence and on the decisions which affect it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Samantha Penner, followed by Daniela Steiner. You have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Hi, thank you for your time. My name is Samantha. I am a parent of 2 children who currently attend Inez Elementary. Inez has a beautifully diverse population with an involved community of families and has been a wonderful school for all of my children to attend. I'm requesting that Inez be allowed to keep the current 23-24 schedule for next year, since it is what the staff and parents want, since it is better for young children, including my incoming kindergartner, who learns best in the mornings, since young students are already falling apart emotionally by the afternoon, and you are now asking them to stay in school until after 4 p.m. Since our bell schedule has changed every year for the past 3 years, and since Inez does not use buses, we do not affect the bus schedule. APS values whole child learning, which fosters a sense of community and encourages interpersonal skills, problem solving, creativity, goal setting, and self-accountability. Constantly changing our schedules does not support the whole child or consider the well-being of our elementary students. So I ask you to please let us keep our current bell schedule at Inez. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Danielle Steiner. You have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Hi, my name is Danielle Steiner. I am the school nurse and a parent of 2 children who attend Inez Elementary. I'm here to talk about the many changes in the bell schedule that has been imposed upon us in the last 3 years. Inez is a Title I community school that has a beautifully diverse student population and a heavily involved community of families. It is a school of choice, and many students transfer to this school all over APS. I am requesting that Inez is allowed to keep their current bell schedule for the next school year, and that the bell schedule changes get community feedback and are community driven. This will be the 4th year in a row that district leadership has caused us to change our bell schedules for very little explanation as to why. Right now, we are being told that it is due to transportation logistics. Our current bell schedule of 8:05 to 3:35 is so much better for many reasons. It is better for families financially, so they won't have to pay for both before or after care. My family currently, if this were to go through, my family would have to pay $200 per month extra out of pocket. It is also what staff and parents want. It is better for young children who learn best in the morning, young students who are already falling apart emotionally by 2 p.m., and you are now asking them to stay in school until 4 p.m. I see this as a school nurse, and working along closely with my school counselor, she has told me that it is also the case. Our bell schedule has changed every year for the past 3 years already. And what seems to be most to APS leadership in my communication that I've had with them is that Inez does not use buses, which is the main reason that I have been told every time I get feedback. Consistency and autonomy is better for attendance and engagement. Let us keep our current bell schedule. Let a community school with engaged families who are traditionally happy with APS make a community choice. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is on Zoom, Claire Aldrich. Are you there?
Hi, board. As I start this. Hi, board chair, members of the board, and superintendent. My name is Claire Aldrich, and I'm a parent of 2 Inez Elementary students. Inez is a Title I community school, and we love it. Both of our children thrive there and are known. Our family is included and welcomed. And I would like to request that Inez is allowed to keep its current bell schedule, which is 8:05 to 3:35, instead of having it changed by the district for a 4th year in a row. Inez buses 0% of its population, 0%. I've sent several letters over the past several weeks about this issue, and every time I get the same form response that says it's about busing, and that's the reason they can't change our Inez's schedule back to what it currently is. But Inez actually uses 0 buses. And because busing is not an issue for us, and because it's a community school, I believe we should be allowed to have the autonomy to make a community decision. This decision is better for families. It's what families want. It's better for students, and it's what staff wants. I would like that you listen to what the community wants and give us the chance to make this decision for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is in the room, Dr. Sinello. Sure, you have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Well, happy spring, Madam President and school board members, and thank you for serving. My name is Dr. Geraldo Chanello, alternative health doctor and minister. For the last few months, I have been advocating for our children's health and well-being of New Mexico, especially Albuquerque. By now, you all have heard that principal was fired and other employees on administrative leave due to parents who were rightfully outraged by the sexualized performance of Atrisco Heritage Academy's prom as a result of the public outcry against this. Many medical doctors in other countries found there is no solid evidence supporting the medical transitioning of young people. Why aren't American clinicians paying attention? Sexually explicit, age-inappropriate pornographic books have been identified in many districts across New Mexico. These inappropriate books are in both middle schools, young as 11 years old, and high schools, young as 14 years old. Besides being on a library shelf, some teachers have assigned sexually explicit pornographic books to be read by the student. Did you know this sexual perversion will promote confusion and deception in their minds and therefore lead to increased mental and emotional illness and suicide? That said, it devalues traditional manhood and womanhood the way our Creator instituted in our culture of one nation under God. Remember your oath of office, section 2254 of the Public School Code. A local school board shall have the following powers or duties. Point A, subject to the rules of the department, develop educational policy for the school district. That said, shouldn't you develop educational policy starting with reading, writing, and arithmetic, not sexual policy of perversion, mutilation, castration, and sterilization, which promotes abortion, molestation, and transgender among students? Please do the right thing for the sake of our children's health and well-being. Thank you, and may God bless you all.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is in the room, Ruth Ann Peterson. You'll have 2 minutes once you begin speaking. Oh, you bet. We'll get that to him. Okay. Thank you.
So my subject is the adult nightclub drag performance at Atrisco Heritage Academy prom for minor children. Students attending Atrisco Heritage Academy's prom after an adult drag performance were left saying inappropriate venue and asking why. What value did this nightclub drag performance add to our prom? I am here as an Albuquerque mother and grandmother asking, why is this person, Dylan Payan, aka Mythica Serene, that exudes inappropriate behavior, allowed to volunteer at the school? Payan claimed in an interview with KOAT to be a member of the school's Gay Straight Alliance and that he works with the school on a volunteer basis. Payan also told KOAT, multiple staff members saw me and what I was wearing and what I was doing. If something was wrong, they would have told me. Everything that I wore was talked about on the phone in detail. Now, this is the important part. It was not an issue when I performed at the school many times before with the exact same dance moves. Seriously? Payan told prom students, if you see a tit pad flying out, mind your business. We're grown. Mind your business. Don't touch that. He then used that tit pad, his words, which he removed and patted students' faces with it. Gross. Who allowed this? First in school at Atrisco Heritage Academy and now at prom. I would also like to know what this board is going to do to prevent both things, drag performances in school and at prom, from ever happening again. This is not about being gay or straight, but rather inappropriate, unneeded sexuality at school and school-sanctioned events. And by the way, your banner up there is very ironic.
Thank you. Your next speaker is on Zoom. Renee Pacheco, are you there? Renee, are you there? Renee, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Okay, there we go. We can hear you. You have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Hang on 1 second.
Okay,
Okay.
we can see you.
Okay. All right. Good evening. I'm Renee Pacheco, and I'm a concerned parent. We as parents are outraged that this school had the gall to allow a sexualized performance in front of our teens. It was not the place nor the time or their right. It was a coordinated effort to have an inappropriate attraction. It had to be arranged and set in motion. Putting administration and principal on leave is not enough. They need to be fired. There should have been an adult presence. The dancing should not have even started. This performance is for adults. High school students do not need to see a man dressed up in skimpy attire, dancing provocatively and showing his genitalia. The administrative and principal broke the law. You have to be 18 years old to enter a strip club where they dance like this. Go back and watch the videos circulating. The students were appalled and stunned. The dancer motivated the crowd. This does not matter if the dancer was a trans female or male. This behavior is unacceptable behavior. You cannot bring back those kids' innocence. It is gone. Their eyes can never not see that again.
Are you all done?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is in the room. It's Maria G. Benavides. You have 2 minutes once you begin speaking, ma'am.
First of all, I drove 3 hours to be here, 3 hours back home. Board members, parents, I'm Chaplain Maria de Jesus Benavides. School activities are to empower our youth, to mold them into future young America. A couple of weeks ago, a certain school activity turned into a nightmare for a lot of us. The wordage in our Constitution, one nation under God, one nation under God. Slowly, we have distanced ourselves from what our forefathers intended for our great America to be. A school activity, a prom. Number one, if I would have sent, or any of you have sent a copy of that video to any of those under 18 children, we would be in jail. We would be serving jail time. It's called pornography, jail time. Does this mean she'll be the principal? The principal has been given time off. Does this mean that she'll be back next year? Does this mean that she'll be put in another school? Number two, if Jesus Christ isn't allowed in schools, why is pornography? Why is pornography, school board, allowed in schools if Jesus Christ is not? When there's a massacre of innocent children murdered in school, this child who isn't happy with the teacher, the principal, goes out, gets a rifle, machine gun, kills 38 children, innocent children. My question, the principal, the teachers, the parents, they arise and call us for prayer. Come pray, come pray. Everybody's devastated. Okay, my question is, what God, you board members, do you teachers, do you parents want us to pray to? You've gotten him out of the school. You've gotten him out of the libraries. You've gotten him out of the stores. You've got him probably out of this building. Who do you want us to pray to? For your children that just died. God isn't a God to be mocked. I ask that we think again, board, parents, president of the board, one nation under God or darkness. Listen to these words, please. If you choose darkness, wait for the greatest lawsuit APS has ever had from Mr., not Miss or Mrs., Mr. Dylan Kayan.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is in the room, Erica McDowell. Erica, you have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Good evening. My name is Erica McDowell, and I use she, they pronouns, and I am the current managing director for GLSEN New Mexico. I'm also a proud APS alum. Shout out to folks at Monte Vista Elementary, Bandelier Elementary, Jefferson Middle School, and Albuquerque High School. Go Bulldogs. This situation that the previous speakers have spoken to, we've noticed has brought up a lot of misinformed information about LGBTQ+ communities and other marginalized people. I want to remind the board and the larger APS community that we have an obligation to ensure that schools are safe places for every single student and staff member, regardless of their identity. And due to the sensitivity of this event, we need to make sure we are referring back to policies and procedures that APS has that have been reviewed by community and approved by the board. We need to be mindful of our rhetoric surrounding this incident and realize that that rhetoric has a real impact on students and staff of this district. And also that any decisions that are made about this situation have a real impact on students and staff in this district. There are people in this district who are working hard to make sure that our schools are safe and welcoming places, particularly for LGBTQ+ students. That work often goes really unrecognized. We want to recognize that and honor that and make sure that we're following the policies and procedures of this board. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is on Zoom, Kelsey Snare. Kelsey, are you there?
Good evening. Yes, I am here.
Okay, you have 2 minutes once you begin speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Kelsey Kinnair, and I am a teacher who teaches at Inez Elementary, which is a Title I community school, and we do not use busing. Inez has a diverse student population and an involved community of families. It is a school of choice, and many students transfer to our school. I am requesting that Inez is allowed to keep their current bell schedule for this 24-25 school year. I have these reasons. It is better for families financially as they won't have to pay for both before and after childcare, since it is what staff and parents want. It is better for young children who learn best in the morning. Since young students are already falling apart emotionally by 2 o'clock, and now we are asking them to stay in school until 4. Our bell schedule has changed every year for the past 3 years already. And since Inez doesn't use buses, which is the reason for the change in the first place, consistency and autonomy is better for attendance and engagement. Please let us keep our current bell schedule and let a community school with engaged families who are happy with APS make our community choice. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is in the room, Miss Janet Sayers. And you have 2 minutes once you begin. Thank you, ma'am.
Well, good evening, Madam President, board members, and Superintendent Blakey. This is my first time to come since all this new arrangement, so I'm very interesting. I am a proud member of the first graduating class of Del Norte High School, 1966. I'm looking around the room and thinking most of you were not even alive, much less a junior at a brand new school. I do want to call attention to the fact that we are celebrating for the entire upcoming school year, the 60th birthday or anniversary of Del Norte High School opening, back when the corner of San Mateo and Montgomery, there was a stop sign, and part of Montgomery was still a dirt road. And there was nothing out there except the Silver Dollar Drive-In and a Golf Mart. But Del Norte is the proud beneficiary of about 15,000 graduates. And this coming school year, we want to call attention to graduates who are artists, musicians, public servants, elected officials, educators, attorneys, medical doctors, anyway, every possible kind of career. And so I will be in touch, especially with the 3 board members who represent the Del Norte cluster area. And I happen to live in Josefina's district, and she's not here tonight, but I just wanted to let you know that. And then I want to speak to the power of volunteers. I started volunteering at Del Norte in 2013. It's been a very interesting experience. I've met a lot of interesting people and students. And then the last thing I wanted to say, just for this lady, is you do, APS allows Jesus clubs at public schools as long as the request came from a student. We have a Jesus club at Del Norte. We have a Jesus club at McKinley Middle School. So I'm not sure how it all works, but thank you for your time and service.
Thank you, Mrs. Sayers. Our next speaker is Staley Snyder. Sorry. And you'll have 2 minutes. And before you start, our next speaker would be David Ames. David Ames. Okay, maybe not. You have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Great, thank you. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Staley Seidler. I am a Trisco Elementary School proud physical educator and third place winner in the Lobo Triathlon. Just shout out there. About 2 years ago, a group of PE teachers got together to discuss and create our own professional development. At that time, we were required to attend professional developments that were created for general education classroom teachers. So we decided to create our own PD that focused on our curriculum and our questions. We started with occasional workshops or sessions hosted at Inez Elementary School. Thank you, Michael. As well as a few other APS schools. And we met in the late afternoon or on weekends. The next year, we began working with the University of New Mexico Physical Education Teacher Education Program. They offered their facilities and their expertise, again, on Saturdays. We then wrote and were awarded a grant for outdoor learning equipment, which I have the shirt on for grant award winners. We have since created, we were awarded a grant for outdoor learning equipment. We have since created a checkout system to share equipment for fishing, archery, rollerblades, tents, longboards, and bicycles for our students. We have also developed and been offered curriculum specific to outdoor learning that aligns with the New Mexico PED Outdoor Learning Initiative. After that, we were invited to create and implement the district-wide highly successful Physical Education Summit, November 7th, 2023. If you can't tell, we're a passionate group. We are now so excited to see that the role groups include physical education and are getting recognized to have specific professional development for our unique way of teaching. And by the way, it will be within the school hours. I'm so excited about that. Woo woo.
Ma'am, you've gone over your 2 minutes. If you could rack up in one quick sentence, if you have.
So far, we're looking at the national standards and looking for the opportunities and possibilities to new ways of teaching our students. Thank you for your time and support.
Thank you. And our last speaker is David. David, you have 2 minutes once you begin.
Hello, members of the board. I'm David. I'm a parent and I'm from Josefina's district as well, District 6. I wanted to comment about a discussion between board member Jackson and the administration that occurred during the last meeting. You all had an excellent, robust discussion regarding the guarantee of the use of high-quality instructional materials. This is a topic of great importance to parents. The administration indicated that high-quality instructional materials may not be district adopted, but they will be guaranteed to meet the requirements of high-quality instructional materials. While it's understood that board members may be discouraged from giving their opinion on this, I'll just say from a parent's perspective, we are absolutely over the moon to hear this. But some questions remain. How is the district going to provide transparency to the community or to the board that this guarantee is being honored? This sort of transparency is essential to build trust with the community. I think most parents are on board with the materials that the district has approved. We all have the various evaluation tools like edreports.org, and it's easy for us to vet the district-approved materials because we know what they are. But what mechanisms are in place, or what can be put in place to inform parents when curriculum is used that deviates from the district-adopted materials? Is there some sort of documentation so that parents can be assured that deviating curriculum has been evaluated by the district? For instance, we have occurrences of a minority of classrooms still implementing aspects of balanced literacy, even though study after study is proving these techniques don't work, and they are in direct opposition to the state's and district stated goals of utilizing curriculum aligned with the science of reading. This seems to be in direct contradiction of the guarantee for high quality instructional material use. Parents are very encouraged and thankful for the direction and focus of the board and administration regarding the use of high quality instructional materials. But we need to have the confidence that the guarantee of a high quality, equitable education for all students is being honored in all classrooms in the district. That would be an ironclad guarantee, and our kids deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Board members, that completes public forum.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez, and thank you also to our public forum guests for coming tonight to share your perspectives. And again, as a reminder, this is not a dialogue, but an opportunity just for the board to hear from the community. And so with that, we will go ahead and move along to our next agenda item, which is focused on student outcomes focused governance. And as part of our commitment to student outcomes focused governance, we will now monitor our progress against interim guardrail number 2, which is that the superintendent will not allow resources to be allocated inequitably. And I will turn it over to Secretary Astorga now to facilitate this discussion.
Thank you, President Gonzalez. As the board president mentioned, we are monitoring guardrail 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3 tonight. So before we begin the discussion, we must confirm that the monitoring reports are complete. So I did meet with Dr. Blakey beforehand, and I do believe that the report meets all the criteria. I did want to provide a side note, though, in the PowerPoints that you all received in the graphs, there is only 1 point of reference because this is the first time that we are actually monitoring this guardrail. So I know we're supposed to have more than 1 point, but that is the reasoning that I decided to say that this is a complete monitoring report. So with that, I will open it up to see if there's anybody who thinks otherwise, or if there's any discussion on confirming that the report is complete.
I think it's complete.
Okay. Awesome. So that's great. Since everyone agrees that the required elements are present, Dr. Blakey, are you and your staff ready to discuss guardrail 2?
Yes, we are.
Awesome. So with that, I will open the floor for a monitoring conversation with the board and any questions that we might have. So if I may, I will start with Renata.
Not at this moment. I don't have a question.
Ms. Jackson?
Okay. And Secretary Astorga, is this for the whole monitoring report so I can question about interim guardrail 2.3?
Yes, and this will be a discussion on the entire guardrail. As you may know, we are not doing a presentation right now because we did review the presentation beforehand and ask the technical and tactical questions. So we are moving straight into the discussion. So anything for 2.1, 2.2, or 2.3.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Okay. Hello. Hi. So in regards to interim guardrail 2.3, my question is this. Given that we know that some schools report that they're being underfunded, I'm trying to understand how a reduction in unused funds is tied to equity instead of simply using resources wisely.
Okay, thank you. Board President, board members, Superintendent Dr. Blakey. Before I answer that question, I do want to thank the APS budget and the grant department, Title I, Student Family Support, Special Ed, Human Resources, Curriculum Instruction, Language Equity, Fine Arts, Indian Education, Library, Capital, the principal group, leadership, Dr. Blakey, and our partners, Education Resource Strategies, for a year's worth related to these interim guardrails. So you can see it was a lot of departments and staff really committed to this. And the whole premise of Guardrail 2.3 is once the resources are allocated equitably, we want to make sure they spend them, that they spend them for the students that they were allocated for. So our intent is to monitor this to make sure that that spend is done this school year for those students, because some of those students are going to move on. They could graduate, they could go to middle school, they could possibly move from Albuquerque. So we want to make sure they get that full equitable resource allocation and it's spent for them.
Thank you. I will ponder.
Awesome. Thank you, President Gonzalez.
Thank you to Dr. Blakey and the team for the very thorough report and responses to all of our questions. I do have a question related to 2.1, which is about the long-term subs. And so it really is, what do we actually know about the impact of having long-term subs serving the students identified in the Martinez-Yazzie lawsuit, so our Martinez-Yazzie plus African American students? And then also, what do we know about positive benefits about efforts to reduce the presence of long-term subs? So in other words, I'm really just trying to connect this guardrail with this interim guardrail, sorry, with the overall guardrail around equitable allocation of resources. So what information do we have that gives us confidence that reducing long-term subs will make a difference for these students?
No, that's a great question. Thank you, Board President and members of the board. What the leadership team looked at in developing this guardrail was finding a way to drive and ensure equitable allocation of certified staff, and choosing twofold the long-term sub coverage rate. You'd asked, there was an excellent question of the tactical question in there that kind of ties into this with respect to the numerator and denominator. What we kind of figured that. So, but what we were doing actually is twofold, right? We want to drive down the vacancy rate, which is what we're doing. And this ties into our programs that we have with Albuquerque Teacher Residency Program, placing residents in these targeted type priority schools, along with our special education teacher training program. So that's driving down the vacancy rates. And then also it is certainly a best practice, as opposed to having a day-to-day variable sub, having a certified long-term sub in the position. So I'm kind of addressing your question in that aspect with respect to staffing.
I'll add to that too, Board President Gonzalez. I think that all research shows that the quality of a teacher is going to be the best indicator of how students perform. And we have seen schools that do mirror enrollments of the Yazzie, Martinez, and African American students at higher numbers that have higher vacancies in having a high quality teacher in the classroom. So second to that, having a substitute that's a long-term substitute who is trained and vetted from substitute services is doesn't replace a teacher, but certainly adds to the stability of the instruction that is in the classroom. And the long-term substitutes also are part of the professional development of the school. They're there on a daily basis. They collaborate with other teachers. And so the more we're able to address these schools that previous to this guardrail, I have to say, we didn't have a system for filling substitutes in a very thoughtful as far as like strategic way. And this has really, excuse me, allowed us to focus on the schools that had students didn't have a teacher, or they had a different teacher every day, or they had somebody covering, or they mixed with another class. And so all of that we know disrupts the learning environment and would lead to negative outcomes for students.
And relative to the question in the technical questions previously, for those tiered priority schools, there were 54 vacancies at the beginning. With this focus, it has gone down to 22 vacancies, and then the long-term sub-coverage rate picks that up.
So you reduce the overall rate
Yes.
and the number of vacancies.
Correct. Vacancy rate went down, fill rate went up.
Thank you. I have additional questions, not on 2 point. I have additional questions,
you.
but I will cede to other
Yes,
members.
yeah, we'll come back to you. Board Member Tapio Romero?
Thank you. So mine is in relation to 2.3, where we talked a little bit about the high turnover in principals and secretaries. So in relation to the turnover in for principals and secretaries, what has APS identified as a reason for this cause? Like, what's the trend for experiencing the high turnover? And I guess the second part to that is, how often is our training updated for people in these new roles?
Okay, board members, board President Blakey. I'm going to talk a little bit about the training, and I might have to defer to HR on why people are retiring or transferring are leaving the district. But as far as the training, we have continuous training all year. So we have virtual training, we have face-to-face training, and we also have staff that goes out to the schools that meets with secretaries or principals as needed to help them with their purchasing. We also have a user guide that we've developed, and we also have supports like I want to say 24/7 because my staff even answers after hours in emails. We have group emails where people can send any type of question and get support immediately. So we're very customer service oriented to support the schools.
May I ask a follow-up to that response? So I guess this is just more in relation to the direct response here, because I hear what you're saying, but what's stated is that people in their new roles are not familiar with purchasing, planning, and deadlines. So it sounds like we are doing the training. Do we know where the disconnect is coming between what's being taught and what's being followed through?
Romero, I think when a secretary or a principal gets into the role, a lot of times they're not familiar with the finance part and understanding like our ERP system and how to enter requisitions, also knowing the particulars of each type of grant or funding and what's required for each one because they do change. So I think as any new role, when they come into it, they're having to learn that to be prepared for their role.
Okay. And then I'll refer to you.
Yes.
The first.
Well, so there is a principal support system, certainly with our Alliance for Leadership and Learning for New Principals. So that is certainly a way to address kind of the training piece with respect to all aspects of being a principal in the principalship. One of the things we're seeing throughout the organization is fairly significant turnover throughout the organization in all positions. We're seeing with A schedule positions, we're seeing with principals. And a lot of this is post-COVID with respect, and I wasn't prepared to have data on this particular item. I can certainly provide that in a separate report with respect to the turnover rates for you, but it is something that we're seeing not only in the principalship, but across the organization.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
You, Board Member Benavides.
Yes, thank you so much. It's nice to see you all again. It's been a long time. I feel like we're old buddies now. Thank you for being here this evening. So my question is in reference to interim goal, guardrail, 2.2 fair student funding, and it's on page 5 of the report. And so it's strategic priority 4, create more flexibility in student-teacher ratios. Just a bit of context, I did ask the question, what flexibility exists for school teams to adjust class sizes, and how would this be implemented? And the answer was schools don't have much flexibility when it comes to this. And so my question is, what plans exist to begin the work with school teams and instructional councils to utilize the limited amount of flexibility we do have in adjusting class size, and how will this impact student performance?
Okay, thank you, Board Member. I have some of our team from ERS here that really helped us with this. So if you don't mind, I'd like to bring them up.
Yeah, good.
Yep. Hello, board members. So our part of our work with APS this year was to support 2 strands of work. One was on a funding model redesign, and the other side was supporting a what we called school design resource use strand of work. In that, we spent a lot of time with APS leadership and then transitioning into a middle school design team structure. And it was through that middle school design team structure where we were working with 8 school teams, including principals, teachers, counselors, folks from those teams, where we were trying to understand what opportunities and flexibilities existed with things like class size, time in the day, thinking about teacher assignments differently in service of strategic priorities. And part of that work was developing what we called models or prototypes of what those designs could look like. through that work, what the design teams helped us understand is that there are some limited ways that school teams now can use resources differently, such as having some pull-out supports to have smaller group sizes within their, set of resources, some opportunities to move staff across grade levels. But given the resource levels in most schools, there are not many opportunities to really flex group size and class size in a way that might allow for much more intensive intervention supports and supports for students of different learning needs. And so that's a big part of the recommendation came from that learning that we had with those middle school teams. Obviously, similar and different challenges may exist in elementary and high school, but that's where a lot of our first sort of insight into that challenge came.
Okay, so thank you. It sounds like the work's being done and we're trying to work within the limited capability. Thanks.
Thank you. Back to Board Member Tomorito.
Hi. My question is also to the long-term subs, Guardrail 2.1. Under what is going well, it's stated here that you provide each substitute a checklist for success and customize a substitute guide to ensure consistency. Want to know if you could give me an example of this checklist for special education substitutes, and then and also what this guide looks like.
I want to just first say that that sounds like a technical
Oh, I'm
question.
sorry.
If you, yeah.
I would agree with that. I do think that an example or the checklist itself or whatever could certainly be provided, but I think the main point is what is the information you need at a strategic level to know if they're meeting the guardrail?
Okay. So pertaining to Guardrail 2.1, and specifically to the special education substitutes, what are we currently doing, not only just to address the need, but also providing the supports we need to help not only increase our teacher coverage for special education, but I know specifically that need is great. If you could just give me an example of what currently you're doing for those special education subs.
I certainly can, and I have to both questions. I can provide detailed information that we have from Kelly Services on that. They have a very detailed special education training program, and I can certainly provide that to you for that. Go ahead, Dr. Brown.
Just, sorry, Mr. Torgerson, on that, I do think that's in the administrative lane, so we don't need to see that. It is more, I think, knowing that it exists and that you're thinking about it is important, and then you can answer the rest of the
Yes,
question.
and then with respect to the checklist, that's something too that we could provide if that's something that the board wishes to say. That also is administrative.
Sure. Thank you. That'll work.
Welcome.
Thank you. I have a question before I move on to the rest of the board, but I also want to just give a thank you to the board, making my facilitation very easy with your smart questions. Yeah, we're doing the work and we're practicing, so it's looking good. My question is, the answer to the question on the bottom of page 2 on the Q&A document reads in part, we could look at using an at-risk index for those allocations that considers special education, English learners, ability, and socioeconomics, which is essentially the groups identified by the Yazzie-Martinez decision. And this is in reference to the formulas used to allocate librarians, nurses, and counselors. So my question is, considering that the guardrail is that the superintendent will not allow resources to be allocated inequitably, what is currently being done to explore the potential of allocating these staff positions based on need? So in other words, there might be a need to move a counselor or a librarian from a school with low numbers of Maya students to a school with larger numbers. So just to repeat that question, what is currently being done to explore the potential of allocating these staff positions based on need?
Okay, board members. Oh, again, I'm going to talk to have ERS help me with this. As we looked at our funding and the way that funding is allocated currently, we were able to work with all the different departments and come up with a guidebook for school budgeting and understand the current way that we're budgeting and start the conversation and start down the path of how we can use what we learned from ERS to be able to develop a methodology to include those groups. So like you said, currently right now with librarians, it's based strictly on enrollment. And the way that we can change it is to include enrollment and then add factors for the student needs or characteristics as identified in the goals and guardrails.
Yeah, and I might just add, I think one of the, a big conversation that we had as a group was thinking about the trade-offs between increasing that sort of need-based allocation and the impact it would have, particularly on the smallest schools in terms of enrollment. One big impact of that would likely be more partial staff allocations so that you can free up some of those resources in order to create that need index. This has been sort of a pervasive trade-off that's been a big part of that modeling work, has been how you can sort of use those resources in a more need-driven way may create challenges, particularly in some of those schools that may end up with more partial staff. And I think that's been a big reason why some of those decisions have sort of been more challenging to make.
Just to clarify, so within the at-risk index model that you're using, we currently do not have a section where we're, I guess, collecting data for Maya students specifically.
I just need clarification on that question.
Yeah, so
Collecting-
before you had said that you can always implement something that consists of targeting the Maya students within the at-risk index. I wanted to clarify if that we're not currently doing that.
Let me get Russ one to answer on that.
I think she's asking what you use to formulate the at-risk funds. What factors do you use in coming up with that allocation?
Thank you.
Rosalinda, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but I believe it's English language learners, mobility, and socioeconomic.
So so that was a clarification, just we do have those.
Yeah, those are in the at-risk formula.
But it's not native students with disabilities.
No, there are no like race or programmatic indicators in the index.
Did you? Well, I guess I need a clarification.
Yeah, we have two follow-ups, so I'll start with President Gonzalez.
Thank you. I guess given that there is the settlement for Martinez Yazzie, is there a point where we could get to collecting that data and actually looking at it relative to our both expenditures and allocations for those particular student groups in addition to the groups that inform the at-risk index?
Yes.
Yes.
The at-risk index factors that we use are in control of the district deciding.
So what's the likelihood then that we would do that in order to meet this guardrail?
It would make sense to do that to meet the guardrail. I think that's a really good example of how we are or how we should be looking at changing our current practices to move forward. So I don't think that the at-risk funding formula factors have been changed in ever since it was created. So I do think that that offers a very good insight to how we start doing our practice different in order to adjust to meet the needs of the students that we are trying to make the biggest impact on.
We're doing a little musical chairs here, Hassan from the ERS team as well. And I think I think that's exactly the right opportunity to think about as we look at the interim guardrail metric around resources going through a fair student funding formula. Adjusting the at-risk formula weights themselves wouldn't necessarily change that. It's sort of just using a different formula that is more grounded in a updated understanding of student need or a more comprehensive understanding of student need if you deviate from the three factors that are currently being used in the at-risk formula. But where it would perhaps make a difference is if you look at page 2 of the report, there are sort of two metrics that are listed there. One is the core interim guardrail metric around the percentage going through a fair student funding formula. And then there is that other metric around the percent that is grounded in student need characteristics. And so revisiting how at-risk allocations are currently done, where right now a portion is based on weights and a portion is given to all schools, could result in that metric adjusting. And so as we think about also what is the interim metric that we can know if we're achieving this goal of a more equitable funding model, in some ways that how much resources are going out on student need characteristics can be a really powerful measure to look at as well.
Thank you. Board Member Jackson, do you still have?
I do. I have a clarification that I think is going to be a technical question, but it is birthed from this conversation. So I hope that that's okay. Okay. Thank you. So from what I understand, if I am correct, or tell me if I'm correct, the district has the ability to address the at-risk funding formula factors and has always had that ability. Yes, okay. The SEG funding is just given to us. We do not have the ability to adjust there. Yes, okay. And then the federal funding, the title money that comes in is also given to us, no ability to adjust.
You are allowed to the district is allowed to allocate those resources in the way that sees fit, as long as you're including socioeconomic status as your driver.
Okay, is that specifically Title I funding? Okay, but like Title II, and I think there's some other acronyms I can't remember. But the Title I funding is can be allocated based on district decisions.
Yeah, there's some federal thresholds, but there's some discretion within those on how much you allocate per whatever your measure of socioeconomic status is.
Okay, and so given that we can supplement but not supplant, the way that specifically the Title I funding, supplement not supplant, the way that we can address the student need is by adjusting the at-risk funding formula? Would be, so the at-risk, and Rosalinda, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm gonna just look for her nodding yes. The at-risk money is something we choose to do, which is out of the SEG. So it's not like given to us as a pot of at-risk money. We receive the SEG, we pull aside money that we use for at-risk dollars that then goes through this formula and goes back to the school for discretionary money on how they can use it. Okay.
And PED has some requirements around reporting how at-risk is being used, separate from their sort of main SEG reporting. But in general, exactly what Dr. Blakey said is it is district discretion to decide how to use at-risk resources and how to allocate them in a sort of separate realm. And obviously all the resources that a school gets sit together, and a lot of the work that the budget team does is grading funds so schools sort of don't have to do that. All right, I'm getting this amount of dollars from here and this amount of dollars from there, but Title I sits on top, at-risk is there, and then all of the sort of baseline resources that is mostly coming out of SEG comprises the full picture of resources that a school gets.
So there are schools that do not receive Title I money that do receive at-risk money. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that question. I just want to give opportunity. Is there any more follow-up for that specific question before we move on? No? Okay. So I believe it was it back Member Jackson, your question?
Okay, so back to me. And so now I'm going to go back to my very first question. So this is in regards to interim 2.3. So I kind of asked about what the current situation is. And so based on the fact that I've asked that kind of current situation, my follow-up to that is we want to spend our money efficiently and not simply because it's there, right? So have you thought about a strategy looking forward that is going to incentivize schools that do spend their funds equitably versus those that
do not.
What? There's might be a recommendation. Can you?
I would like to seek to understand in alignment to guardrail 2.3, based on the fact that, okay, now I'm gonna have to kind of think about this here. Based on the fact that you are hoping to decrease the percentage of unspent funds, have you thought about a future action you might take to incentivize that?
Board Member Jackson.
Is it the incentive?
It's future.
Yes, because I asked already about the current piece. Oh, sorry, okay. What strategies will you use going forward to incentivize efficient use of funds?
Okay.
Yes? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Board Member Jackson, members of the board, Superintendent Mikey. We have some priorities that we're looking at. One of them is to give guidance in our monitoring report. We give an example of what Title I guidance is. So it is like to spend a certain percentage by fall break, a certain percentage by winter break, by spring break, and of course by the deadlines. Another is the consolidation of federal and state programs into a central position for oversight that's happening in the reorganization of central office. By having all the funds together, you're able to see that holistic view, to see how many funds each school actually gets, and where there's that opportunity for braiding of funds. And another tool we have is the template that ERS helped us with the budgeting office. And it is another consolidation of having a tool for the schools to be able to build their budgets, and they're able to see the whole view and see all the funds, to be able to be strategic and make decisions where the decisions are closest to the schools, to the students, and to the community.
Okay, thank you. That last part is kind of what I was getting at, so I appreciate that. Do you have something to add, Ms. Montoya?
I was just going to add that during this time with ERS, there was a budget collab team that was put together to kind of go over and strategically look at how we can use funding. And it's not just the budget team or anything like that. It's a group of different, principals and teachers and different individuals. And we're going to continue that work. We plan to continue that work to continue to look at different ways that we can work to always improve the way we distribute the funds.
Thank you.
Thank you. President Gonzalez, do you have another question?
I do. It is on guardrail 2.2, and it kind of builds off Secretary Sorga's question around the formulas and thresholds for allocation of staff. But it is related specifically to slide 14 in the ERS update, where you speak to the necessary conditions for moving towards student-based budgeting, and we have the green and the yellow. And so I think Secretary Sorga's question kind of addressed the final one, that moving towards policies and resource flexibilities, and that was, I think, a little bit of Member Benavidez's question as well. So my question is, what current strategies or actions are you taking to move toward the other necessary conditions? So the sufficient overall resource levels, which I know that's some stuff that we can control and some we cannot, but also most schools operating at a sufficient scale.
Board Member Gonzalez, Board Member Superintendent Blakey. I think that really talks to the work that Rosalinda is doing with the budget collab group, and being able to understand each resource and how flexible it is. Also understanding any policy or statute that is underneath it or underlies it, that affects it, to be able to understand what kind of changes can be made with that. So getting all the experts and all the people that actually own those programs and those funds, and being able to understand it, to be able to identify where we can change it. So that budget collab team is definitely a step towards that. And then also understanding our current state to be able to to identify any flexibilities like the at-risk or the Title I are definitely the first ones that we're going to be looking at going forward.
Thank you for that. I think that does address the efforts to have policies and resource flexibilities. I'm curious about efforts or strategies to address sufficient overall resource levels and schools operating at sufficient scale, which, well, I'll stop. Scale.
Thank you, Board Member Tapia Romero. Do you
No,
have?
I wanted to ask,
Oh,
like, sorry, what are the strategies
no, I
there?
thought you were like.
I was going to refer to what scale could mean in the context of our district, but I would like to hear what the strategies are, because I think
So I
that was
think
an opinion.
that also is the continued work of right sizing. So how do we look at what constitutes a sufficient size school, and how can we look at, I think a lot of work that we're looking at is not about closing schools, but how we can increase the student experience for our students by being able to provide them a full service of services at schools. And so the work going forward from my angle would answer that by saying to be more aggressive on the right sizing and how we can look at offering our students an experience that is the same as an experience at a school that is fully funded because of the size of the school.
And I might just add, not in terms of what the district is doing, but in terms of what we've seen other systems in very similar places move toward. I think exactly what Dr. Blakey said from the perspective of sort of understanding the challenges in student experience, teacher experience, and outcomes in some of those schools that are, in that subscale enrollment threshold. I think that allows you first to then understand what are the ways in which you can design schools at that enrollment threshold that really enable those experiences. Where might there be opportunities or need to sort of think about what reconfiguration looks like, and then all the way up to what, a closure and consolidation. But there's several levers that we see systems move toward and sort of play with, depending on the context, in order to really think about specifically the sort of the challenge with having a lot of resources currently in your small schools, but not necessarily translating into those outcomes that you'd want to see. And I think similarly, again, in terms of where we see other systems like you all shift towards, I think the focus that we've heard and seen with special education, and really thinking about both the service delivery model, how you can move towards some of those more inclusion-based settings and start to enable more flexibility across those resources. That's a huge way to sort of free up some of what those overall resource constraints look like in your context now. So just to offer a little bit of that sort of national perspective and some of the conversations that we've been having with the folks in APS.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Board Tapia Romero. Board Member Tapia Romero.
No, my second question was already answered and with similar other style questions. So no, I'm good.
Board Member Benavides, do you have another question?
I do. I have one more. And pardon me, I'm having an allergy attack. I'm not trying to get out of asking a question. This is pertinent to interim guardrail 2.1 sub-coverage rate, and referencing what's going well on page 3 of the monitoring report. And so of the seven items listed, and for example, mentorships, financial incentives, orientation, recruitment, marketing, which had the most impact on increasing the rate from 59 to 95%, which is fantastic, and which was the least effective? And is there a plan or strategy in place to use this information to get that to 100%?
So thank you. That's a great question. I'll attack part of that with respect to the vacancy rate and what we're doing with respect, as I mentioned previously, on the Albuquerque Teacher Residency Program and our special education teacher training program. to drive down the vacancy rates. I'd have to reach back to Kelly Services back there to see which of these, my guess is the sign-on bonus and the mentorship, and all of that is acting kind of jointly to do that. And this is the grind and the work that we're continuing to do. And one of the things that I do wish to, while it's a 3-page report, there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes to crank out this and driving that difference from 59% to the high 90s. So that's a big part of the work, and it's not certainly reflective here, but I do want to shout out to the HR recruiting team, the HR operations team, and Kelly Services on that. And with respect to what is most effective, I have Trish Davis with Kelly Services. So Trish.
People involved in this.
Thank you, Madam President, and members of the board and Superintendent Blakey. My name is Tricia Davis, part of Kelly Education. I'm the director for strategic accounts. And basically what we found is a lot of what's been most successful is our mentorship program. So we have identified one of our key substitutes. Her name's Jasmine, and she's been one of our substitutes for about 3 years. And she actually is working closely with the schools and our substitutes. And she's on site at many of the locations a couple days a week and really mentoring our substitutes on better classroom management, looking at opportunities for special education, how to manage that more effectively, and tactics as it relates to supporting not only the students, and then they're also bridging between resources within the school to the substitutes, because we found that a substitute shows up and that gets back to the checklist. Maybe they don't have the resources needed. So bridging the gap between making sure that they're have the proper PD days that align with what Dr. Blakey was saying earlier about making sure that they have all the resources necessary as a long-term substitute to fill those gaps until the HR team fills them with a full-time position. So again, I think the most impactful part of that is yes, the training, but that true mentorship to have somebody side by side with some of these long terms to really make them feel like they're part of the team.
And they're supported for sure.
Yes, and supported.
And with respect to the kind of the earlier part too, shouting out the recruiting team, just this year, they've been on 41 separate recruiting events. And so that's very impactful. This year, correct.
Wow.
This year also was the first year that we've hit 4 HBCUs as well to kind of work on some of our diversity and inclusion as well. So we're really exploring all avenues to drive down the vacancy rate. And one of the things that Kelly Services is also doing is they're doing site-based, community-based outreach at the school level so we can bring people in that are already there and in the community. So that's been very helpful too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, board member Tapia, Tomarito, sorry.
Along the same line.
It's like, stay where you
Don't leave, maybe you can answer this for me. I'm off the interim guardrail 2.2 under the special education delivery models. Now, when we're looking at long-term subs and also your checklist and all of those matters, could you tell me, as I'm trying to understand here, when we're re-examining identification processes and special and service model structures, and also looking at inclusion and general education environments, I know there's been just a little bit of topic on the requirements and how we're fulfilling that for IDEA, especially for our high school and middle school students. Would you?
Can you please rephrase your question?
Okay, okay. Help me to understand for our middle school and high school students, the special education delivery models when we're looking at being more effective in inclusion-based and general education environments. What does that look like?
So I think Anitra's coming.
I don't mean to pull her out. No.
Yeah, we're good. So good evening, Board President, Dr. Blakey, and members of the board. So as we're looking at inclusion models,
special education service models fall under strategic priority 2 in rigorous instruction. So over the last year, we've been building a framework to support all students in the district and really support staff as well in the inclusion model. So we're using setting data, so setting 3, so those are students that are out of the classroom more. So that, let's say in high school, they receive 5 to 7 classes in a small special ed setting, so small group. So this year we've been designing what that could look like for our students, looking at the data. Over the last 3 weeks, we are now actually in the middle of our 3rd cohort of school teams. Our administrators attended a 1-day overview, but bringing in the school teams, gen ed, special ed, administration, to look at their own data, their own service models, how they're supporting students in their schools. So this will continue on through the fall, so it's not going to go away. We just want them to create an action plan, which we'll use to support them moving forward in this work. So we'll continue looking at setting data, looking at student outcome data, but really making sure that we provide students an opportunity to high quality instruction in the gen ed setting. As we look at how we're working with tele services and substitutes, we've done a lot of work hand in hand with Tricia in redesigning how we support students, how we're supporting schools. Last year, I believe, Tricia, we looked at how we were sending out subs into schools. So changing what it was
Yeah, we changed it from more levels, level 1, 2, and 3, rather than saying basic. And I think we said basic and then severe. So really changing the way we were presenting it, not only to the community, but internally, to better prepare our substitutes. And yes, we worked hand in hand on several different workshops to make sure that we were providing that insight to not only our substitutes, but as they go out into each of the schools to better prepare them, but also have them think differently about, wow, I would really love to take a job assignment helping a student with X, Y, and Z rather than just saying basic or severe. So more training as it relates to going into it and from a recruiting perspective and working with HR.
And also too, there's a partnership certainly with the vacancy rate reduction on the special education teacher training program that we have. We've actually doubled the capacity on that by partnering now with UNM. We had a partnership and have a partnership with CNM. We have the largest cohort this year is 30 additional residents in the special education teacher training program. It's the 5th cohort, 101 folks that have gone through the system already. So that's another mechanism to not only mentor and onboard and provide rigorous training for them.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Before I move on, I want to acknowledge just the team effort that we've seen throughout this meeting and really thank you all for being here, first of all, to answer these questions, but just all the work that you've done. Is there any other questions from any of the board members? And I know board member Dominguez, you just got here, so I don't know if you, yeah, okay. Okay, yes.
So related to guardrail 3, and it sort of builds off of member Tapia Romero's question around the high turnover rates with principals and secretaries listed as a root cause for funds not being spent. I'm curious if you play out the root cause and you ask why is it that we have high turnover rates for principals and secretaries? And in particular, what do we know, in current state, what do we know about working conditions that our principals are facing that may contribute to the high turnover? And then what might we do to address those? Because as I look at next level of work, I don't see anything about addressing why principals might be leaving.
Right. So part of that I can speak to in a separate report that was part of that particular guardrail report. But one of the things we are seeing this, as I mentioned, up and down through the organization, and we've seen an increase in turnover post-COVID, quite frankly. And a lot of folks and also labor participation rates here in New Mexico are problematic as well. But it is what I'm hearing and what we hear through, we have a APSBA meet and confer group what resonates and what has recently resonated with the last meeting that we had with them certainly has been just that, the working conditions. We all have very difficult jobs and they're all very hard and very challenging. Post-COVID, that seems to have a spike in all of the things that folks are balancing out there. And certainly the 20%-ish turnover rate is something we're seeing throughout the organization. And we have seen fairly significant, there's two things, right? There's wages and there's working conditions. And the wages certainly, say for example, 2018-19, a level 1 teacher was making $36,000 a year. They're now making $54,000.
Right.
So there's been, basically a significant rate increase there, and we're still seeing significant turnover. We're seeing that also we've added an extra salary band for our experienced principals, a level 4 band recently over the last 2 years to try and address that issue. So it's really more about the work and the things that are happening on a day-to-day basis that's driving a high turnover rate. So I think we need to really hone in on your question. That's what we really need as an organization to look at strategically to address what we can do to address the working conditions and the potential workload that is happening and driving folks to take a retirement and turnover. We're certainly seeing that all the way up and down the chain.
I would say for the next level of work, what should be added is that what Mr. Torgerson is talking about too, that the principals have asked for more support from us. And so I am trying to look at how can I reorganize ourselves to make sure that we are providing support to our principals in a very strategic way. And a lot of the work I think that you'll see coming in the next few months will indicate how can we change how we operate to make sure that the principals don't feel isolated or lonely, and that they feel supported. And what can I do to make sure that they have that level of support? And I would say it's, as Mr. Torgerson was saying, sorry, I just changed your name. I think it is different for secretaries and principals. I don't think that the principals are indicating it's a wage issue. They've had pretty significant salary increases over the past few years. It's more conditions and feeling isolated and lonely and bearing on a lot of stress. The secretaries, I think, is more of a wage situation where sometimes they're working multiple jobs, one pays more, they kind of go towards that one, or they move up throughout the organization from like an entry-level clerk position at a school to, the highest level that they can get to in the organization. So some of them, they haven't necessarily left the district in the secretary arena. It's that they've moved from that position into positions where they're able to make better wages usually.
Any follow-up? Awesome. I do want to give Board Member Dominguez an opportunity if you have any questions.
Thank you, and sorry I was late, but I was serving another duty. Thank goodness I didn't get chosen. Oh. Is that not on?
Yeah.
Apparently. Is it red?
Now you're on.
No, you're
Okay. So I was excusing myself for being late. I was at jury duty and dodged that bullet, so I'm here. But it was a long day. The question I have has to do with the part of the report that addressed the stress that small schools or small enrollment schools have on our on the budget. And let me get to my questions or the I believe that's under 2.2 interim guardrail 2.2. And the question is, we also have equally small, if not smaller, charter schools in APS, and what is the budgetary impact of these campuses on on our resources, the district resources.
Bernard, I know that our report did not include charter school funding or small schools, so I don't know. if you
Right,
want to speak to that,
and-
but just in terms of the report that you saw, that would not have included charter,
Okay.
schools or funding systems for charter schools.
Board Member Josefina, that's correct. Our work so far with ERS was targeted on our schools, and that is the data that we are presenting.
Okay. So then let me ask it differently. Are there other small schools that tend to impact and impact the stress on our budget, allocation or distribution to schools? And I know we are repurposing some schools. I guess what is the plan? What are next steps for that? But that's a future.
Yeah, so maybe.
So,
I might be wrong if what your intention is, but maybe asking what are the strategies to reduce the stress on small schools or allocations in small schools?
On the budget, yeah, I can address
Okay.
it that way. So it's not necessarily just in general the small schools, but we have a lot of alternative schools that may be looked at as small schools, right? And those are probably some of our highest cost to the budget, or the highest effect on the budget, is because if you see some of the costs, like it's usually, I think our cost now is about 13,000 per student approximately across the board. And in some of those alternative schools, I'm thinking one in particular, it could be in the range of like 36,000. So that does put a stress on the budget, but of course, we're trying to serve the needs that we have in our community. So we have to it's kind of a balancing act, is it worth putting those additional funds into some of these schools? And if we're seeing good outcomes, I don't see that as really a stress, because as long as the outcomes are good and we're helping those students, then it's worth it. But we are going to be looking at maybe possibly in some of the right sizing of the district. One of the things is probably it's good for us to see which are the small schools that are costing a lot and have low outcomes, right? Because it could be that because we're not, the way we allocate some of the stuff, we can't allocate fully so that they have that great experience that a larger school would have of all the, having a full-time librarian, a full-time nurse, all those things that give the student a better experience. So it's not necessarily just looking at the size of the school, but also the outcomes that the children are having. So, based on what's on the board. Okay. And what has been talked. So when you say schools that are having good outcomes, how do we ensure equity in that case?
Board Member Dominguez, Board Member Superintendent, that goes back to the whole intent of this project, was to see how we could, first of all, is to look at our current resources and then look at what is possible and what resources have that flexibility, whether it be at-risk funds or Title I funds or Title III funds, and trying to identify how can we introduce those other characteristics that help us on that goal.
We, just for clarification, and Ms. Montoya talked a little bit about it, but one thing I've been kind of stressing the team that I want to look at is how we fund our schools of choice, most of them, is different than what we presented we do with the formulas of staffing for the other schools. And so how do we start to look at that as far as kind of a first step into making sure that we're using the money the most strategically in all of our schools? I don't know if you've looked before, but on our SAPR site, you can look at how much per student funding is per school. And you'll see on there that we have some schools of choice that are funded at a much higher level than the more traditional schools. So within our own district of schools that we have control over, I think there's opportunities for how we can best utilize funds that are kind of divvied up to the school without using a formula right now.
And I appreciate that. That's exactly, I guess I'm looking for that reassurance, right? Because I worry about, yeah. So thank you. That begins to answer or address my concern about equity as we look at schools of choice.
Thank you. Is there any other questions from board members? No? Awesome. Well, I do want to remind everyone that this is our first time measuring this guardrail. So there's a lot of questions about how we could do things and a lot of changes that might happen. I also want to remind folks that if you are interested in reading some of the questions and answers that we submitted beforehand, those are on the APS website, and you can look at them there to get a better understanding for yourself. But thank you, board members, for this productive conversation and the presenters. Did you have something?
No,
Oh, okay.
Thank you all too.
Yeah, thank you. So now we must vote on whether or not we will accept this monitoring report. As a point of clarity, we are voting to accept this report as a formal acknowledgement that we had a satisfactory conversation with the superintendent and have a deeper understanding of how the current reality for students lines up with our vision for them. So to accept, we must answer yes to the following questions. First, does the reality of this report meet our vision of the goal? And I will open it up. We'll do one question at a time. So does the reality of this report meet our vision of the goal? Or guardrail, sorry.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So the first is a yes. The second question is there growth toward the vision?
Yes.
Yes. Very clearly. Great. The last question, is there a strategy and plan sufficient to cause growth toward the vision? Awesome. So all three are yes, so the board can accept the monitoring report, and we're confident that the data is accurate and the superintendent is working to improve student outcomes. So President Gonzalez, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Secretary Astorga. And so may I please have a motion to accept the progress monitoring reports for Guardrail 2, interim guardrails 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3 for equitable allocation of resources.
I move to accept the monitoring report for interim guardrail 2, for guardrail 2 and interim guardrail 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. This is Courtney.
I'll second. This is Janelle.
Thank you. We have a motion from Member Jackson and a second from Secretary Astorga. Ms. King, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Janelle Estrada,
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito,
Yes.
Heather Benavides, Crystal Tapia Romero,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes. So the motion carries. So we have accepted the monitoring report for Guardrail 2. So again, I just want to echo the appreciation to Superintendent Blakey and the team. And I did kind of want to get like a little dingy bell for every time a new person came up. So we could be like, woo! But it just shows what a team effort this is. And it's really great to see the progress that the team is making. With that, we will move on in our agenda to our consent agenda, which is agenda item 6. approval of the consent agenda, which includes 6.1 through 6.11. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
That we accept the consent agenda, including items 6.1 through 6.11 on the agenda. This is Heather.
And this is Crystal. I will second it.
Thank you. We have a motion from member Benavides and a second from member Tapia Romero. Ms. King, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Janelle Estrada,
Yes.
Ronaldo Tamorito,
Yes.
Heather Benavides, Crystal Tapia Romero,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes, so the motion carries and we have accepted the consent agenda. Next up is agenda item 7, which is our discussion items. We have 2. 7.1 is an update on the district's series 2024 general obligation bond. We have Renette Apalaca, our chief financial officer, and Mark Turnbull, the executive director of accounting. I do want to state that we are trying to move away from presentations. So we actually using time in board meetings for presentations. We have reviewed the presentation. We've reviewed the PowerPoint. And so I do want to just open it up to the board for any questions for our presenters.
No questions.
Great. Well, thank you for the very thorough materials, and I hope you got some steps in. We will move on to agenda item 7.2, which is the budget update. We still have Renette Apalaca, our chief financial officer, joined now by Rosalinda Montoya, the executive director of budget and strategic planning. Again, we have had a chance to review the PowerPoint presentation, so we will not be using time during the board meeting to present the PowerPoint slides. There were a few questions submitted in advance from board members related to the budget, and so I will now open it up to the rest, or to the full board, sorry, open up the floor for additional questions and discussion related to the budget. Prior to doing that, I want to state that, as you all know, we have been going on a journey of presentations on the budget and how the budget is developed for the next school year, and really working to align that to the goals and to the guardrails. And there's lots of change involved and new processes. And so we're deeply appreciative to the team for the work that you're doing. This is all leading up towards the big date of May 29th, which is when we will have the opportunity to vote on and approve the budget. And so this is the last This is almost the last opportunity. This is the last opportunity, yes, to ask questions about the budget that will provide you, board members, with information that you may need in order to approve the budget. So if you can take that lens of what information do I need, does my community need, does my constituents need, in order to be a yes vote on this budget on May 29th, as well as if you have any specific questions on the presentation. And so with all of that prologue, I'll open the floor to questions.
Great job, President Gonzalez.
Well, thank you.
And you guys.
I'll go. I just gotta find my.
I know. I also have a question. I'm just now looking for it. Member Jackson, you will be the first to ask your question.
Thank you. I've got the slide that I had the question on. Okay, so it's on slide 31. It's in reference to the Teachers Leader Network, that first expenditure. And so my question is, what strategy do you have and what data can you present that from the district to ensure that the TLN network resource allocation listed on page 31 is, 1, aligning to the goals that are listed next to it, and 2, that it is ensuring a direct improvement in student outcomes?
We'll have Joyce answer that one. Up from CNI.
From curriculum and instruction.
Good evening. board president, board members, and superintendent. The change that we made this year, some of the work that we did to ensure that the work is aligned to the goals and guardrails was starting with a book study of 4DX. So every member on the TLN read the book, and then their task was to create a wildly important goal or goals and critical actions aligned to the specific district goals. So our ELA team, elementary, is focusing on foundational skills, because they believe that that's the thing that's lacking. And if students got strong foundational skills, using foundations in K through 3, then they would be more proficient readers from 3rd grade on. So that's one example of some of the things that we're doing. So their work is aligned specifically to critical actions, research-based instructional strategies that will support teacher practices and student achievement. Even our science team has a math goal. So they're working on incorporating math practices in their science activities and helping teachers with that. So all of the professional development has practices aligned to the goals and guardrails.
And are these resources, the Teachers Leader Network, all of these specialists, are they available district-wide, or are they only deployed to areas of highest need?
They're available district-wide, and there's a document that we provide with principals that shows some of our teams have broken up the district into schools that they've worked with. Others are available to all schools. It depends on the size of the team. Right now, social studies, we have one person that is covering K through 12, but this person is like having 3.
Okay, so do you think that this allocation is, or this potential expenditure is enough to support the goals to improve student outcomes?
We would always like to have more, but it's what can be afforded with the other items that we use Title II funding for. And so we do prioritize, like our elementary team is 5 and it has additionally 1 specialist just focusing on letters and early literacy. Our secondary ELA team is only a team of 2. Our elementary math team is a team of 5, I believe. We have 3 at the middle school, so we have a little bit more focus on middle school math to align to goal 2.
Okay. I think that's sparse.
Science is 3. We're hoping to add a PE if we can if the funds work out. We haven't received the exact allocation yet, so our budget is built on a preliminary estimate of what we'll receive with carryover.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Oh, I forgot.
You're in charge.
I'm like looking at Janelle.
And if I could just add one thing that I didn't put in these, but all of these budgets are preliminary. We actually haven't received our final 975, which is the SEG. So we're all doing it on kind of projections. So if any changes do materialize that are of material, we will bring that up on the final presentation.
Great, thank you. Other questions from the board on the budget presentation?
I have a question.
Member Dominguez.
And it dovetails nicely with Member Jackson's. How does the Teacher Leader Network address ELL students? And I tried to get your attention.
You're
like,
back.
wait.
Board Member Dominguez, I'm sorry, I was looking at numbers. Can you restate your question?
Oh, yes. How does the Teacher Learning Network address ELL students?
I think one really positive shift that's been happening over the last 2 years is the collaboration between our departments and other departments. I think prior to coming here, there was our professional development was limited to what our team provided. And now with high quality material adoption and professional development planning, we have members from LCE, special ed, Title I, and even equity invited to every planning meeting for professional development. So we ensure that every student's needs are being met in that professional development. So while
Nice.
my team are not specialists, we bring in those department specialists. We've made some huge gains in the amount of collaboration and the work that we are doing together. It's pretty amazing to see.
Great. Any evidence that's trickling down yet? I know it's still early.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Any evidence that it's trickling down to classrooms yet? And I recognizing that it's still 2 years for shifting, it's still early.
We're working with Zapper to try to come up with ideas. It's hard to measure, honestly, the TLN's effect
Mhm.
because they're not within an arm's reach of students, right? So the data that we do have is qualitative data. And we have a lot of data from teachers that says, this is changing my practice. And that's from some of the math PD, the grading pilot, the foundations trainings. We have teachers that have said the materials we bought, Heggerty, has changed their practice and that they're seeing it in their progress monitoring of iStation and iReady data.
And I mean, this is exciting news, right? Is that mostly at the elementary school or?
The
Mid-school.
qualitative feedback is K-12.
Sorry, Ms. Gormley, if I may.
Sorry.
I just want to make sure that we're focused on budget-related questions that are going to help us have the information we need to approve the budget.
Okay.
And so the question, can you restate the question in a way that's related to the budget?
Is it a good, do you believe at this point is, how is that approach, that shift impacting, or actually I'm asking for an opinion from you. And I don't know if that's,
Which is fine. I think, like, is there a return on investment for?
is it a good use of resources thus far?
The ending of the TLN.
This shift that,
So the shift actually did not take financial resources to do. It really,
great,
it was just enforcing that will work together and that the right people will be at the table in planning. So that wasn't a fiscal cost, but I do think that we are very fiscally responsible with our funds and make sure that we target the practices and resources that will best impact student outcomes.
and it sounds like a great potential investment line.
Great. So thank you, Ms. Gormley. I did have a question related to the budget, and it's in part response to the question that's on page 11 of the Q&A, which essentially asks, is it true that student enrollment is decreasing while personnel costs are increasing? And the answer essentially says yes, because of salary increases. And so my question really is, this doesn't seem sustainable. And so what will be done to address this trend? And we just heard from the ERS team and saw some of the potential strategies, but I'm just curious, will that be enough to address the trend lines that kind of look like that? Like, what confidence that we have that we'll be able to address that? What else might we be able to do?
Board President, board members, Superintendent, Dr. Blakey. Something that the program side of district and also working with finance is looking at any duplication of efforts. I know Dr. Antonio Gonzalez had talked about that work. So that's going to help us to ensure, as we're looking at our funds going down, that anything that might be a duplication that we're able to look at. And also add programs, you know, if you're going to add a program, then what do you have to scale back on? And that's something that we continuously work with departments.
Yeah, another kind of easy or low hanging fruit to address that kind of thing is we do have a lot of vacant positions, right? So I think in some of the work in this looking at how positions can be used most effectively, that once all that movement and all that is stabilized, then we can look at what positions are vacant that we may no longer need, right? That they have become obsolete, or because we do have a few positions, not many, but a few that maybe have been vacant for a couple of years. So could we use them? Yes, probably. But if we've been working without them, maybe they might be something to look at. So there is a lot of different approaches we can take to really address that area. We can't really address, some of it is we have to fund the FTE and the subs, kind of what we were speaking about before. And so because I have to budget as if all positions are filled, right? And so there's always some vacancy savings there. So it's not necessarily that all of those positions are using some of the budget. We'll have to use it for subs or we can use it in other ways.
Thank you for that. And that's reassuring. Although I think I still have concerns about that trend line. And so just considering that our budget policy asks for projections, not required immediately, but I think it would be helpful to know, like, what is the 5-year projection for what that line is going to look like of personnel costs relative to revenue generated by student enrollment.
Yep.
So whenever that is
Doesn't
doable.
look
I
pretty,
just-
but yes, we
Well-
can get that to you.
Great, thank you. Other questions on budget?
Can I piggyback off of, so based on what President Gonzalez said there, when we're talking about our 5-year trend, I think if it's possible to, even if we look at how many teachers are gonna be retiring, so they're usually at a higher level versus entry level, and there's a pay difference there. And hopefully that's gonna offset some of our expenses. I'm just thinking out loud. Okay.
Yes. Yeah,
Yes,
there
and-
are many factors that, will affect it. So
Yes and no. So the problem is that because of the way that we're funded with the teacher experience as a factor, if you bring in more level 1 teachers, it will then hurt you on the other side of what we call the T&E index of generating funds based on the level of teacher you have.
yeah, nationally board certified teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah, they bring in a little bit more. So yeah, it's always a balancing act because, some ways it can help, but then other things offset it. So it's going to be a big task that the district has, but I know that we'll be able to address it.
Yeah, and it's certainly not needed in the context of being able to approve this year's budget, so don't go crazy trying to produce that. But I'm like, it does seem that it could be ugly, and so just knowing how ugly or how bad over time, and what is the likelihood of some of these various strategies to address it and reverse that trend line.
Yeah, and I will say it will look ugly, but part of it is because we won't know exactly, we have to assume that things are staying the same. In one of these pages, I have all the 13 contributing factors to the SEG. And so there's a lot of moving parts to it, right? So even though the enrollment is a huge part of it, there are other factors that go into that. So
Great. Any other questions on the budget? Member Jackson.
Oh, sorry. It's just gonna piggy off what she was just talking about, and then I'm done. And this is, I don't mean to be provocative, but I do. So I have been sitting in this seat for 2 years and 5 months. And I continue to hear that we are going to look at a duplication of efforts. And I continue to hear that, and I continue to hear that. So I think what I'm looking for is an assurance, Dr. Blakey, from you guys. Are we actually going to look at duplication of efforts? And when are we going to be able to prove that that duplication has been looked at and it has been addressed to make not necessarily cuts to the budget, but to make the budget more efficient?
Do you want to? Sorry, we've already started some of that work, so I'll have Dr. Gonzalez talk about it.
Madam President, Member Jackson, Superintendent Blakey, as was shared, the Council of Great City Schools came to do a strategic support visit the beginning of March. We are in receipt of recommendations along those very lines. Initial steps have already begun to consolidate efforts in the district support departments to get at exactly what you're talking about. So for example, there have been instances with federal programs, for example, Title I, Title II, Title III, Medicaid, where these funds have been put inside departments. Thus, a department focus has manifested as opposed to a district focus. So really looking at a district support plan where federal programs, for example, are put in a district setting and with an allocation process for district programs is in place. Not to say that the work that was previously done wasn't well-intended, but perhaps it manifested silos. So what we're doing now is we're taking that as an example, and there's others, and de-departmentalizing them and putting them in a district light so that we are able to look strategically and say, family engagement. There's 5 different initiatives in 5 different departments with 5 different messages going out to schools. Whereas we take that initiative, we look at it strategically, we take the best out of the different pieces of work that have been happening and produce one support to schools along the initiative, in this hypothetical example being family engagement. Long-winded answer to say that work has begun and is ongoing over the next several months at the direction of the superintendent. And I do understand, although I'll defer to Dr. Blakey, that there is that information is soon to be ready in terms of what the council did find.
Okay. And to your best assurance, that effort is reflected as best as possible in this current budget that will be presented to us for approval? No.
No, it will be reflected in next year's budget.
Yeah, next year's budget. Okay. Okay. But you are assuring me right now on May 1st, 2024 at 7:04 p.m.
I am assuring you that this began on April 1st.
Appreciate it.
Yes, and I can assure you that by May 1st, 2025, we would be able to show you a difference in what department budgets look like today and for next year's budget.
Thank you.
Great. Any further questions on the budget?
I have a question, but I think it's tactical, so I might just email it to you if that's okay.
That's great. And again, other technical follow-up questions can be emailed. And again, recognizing that this is to enable the board to get all of the information that you need to be able to approve the budget on May 29th. So were you leaning in to ask a question? No. Okay. Just shuffling. So thank you, Ms. Apalaca and Ms. Montoya, for your responses and importantly for the work that you're doing on the budget. And so that concludes our discussion items, and we will move now to the president's report. And so I want to begin again by expressing appreciation to the team for the report on the guardrail and the team effort that it was for Guardrail 2. But I also want to thank Secretary Astorga for stepping in and facilitating the progress monitoring for Guardrail 2 tonight. So thank you for that. And also to fellow board members for helping to monitor our questions and to help ensure that they are smart, specific, measure as an ART. And next up, I know. Next up, to facilitate the next goal, which is May 15th, and it's goal 4, is member Tome Warito. So she has the facilitation guide and already has plans to meet with the staff on that. So we're really excited about that because we do know a lot of time and effort goes into producing these reports. And we want to make sure both that reflects the great work that's happening in the district, but we have an opportunity for real dialogue and discussion towards improving student outcomes. So I just want to thank the staff again for their efforts, but also board members for your work to improve our question asking. I also, to that end, want to mention and share, Member Benavides sort of referred to this a little bit. We've spent a lot of time together recently. The staff, along with the board, spent 2 days together in a 2-day training to learn more about student outcomes focused governance. So we had an opportunity to talk about a whole host of things: mindset, culture, question asking, effective progress monitoring, and more. And some of it was sometimes uncomfortable, but it was good because we were challenging adult behaviors and challenging some of the mindsets that may have been getting in the way of improvement in student outcomes in the past. So it's a really great opportunity, and just very appreciative for everyone for making that time and for being there, and also, more importantly, for putting the work, that practice to work on behalf of our students. Again, I'll just reiterate on the budget. So thank you to Ms. Apodaca and Ms. Montoya for preparing the budget, budget presentation and the budget, not just this month, but for every month from January leading up to this and leading up to the May 29th conversation. And so board members, again, if you do have any questions about the budget or any concerns about the budget, please submit them to staff as soon as you can to allow the budget team ample time to be able to respond to those, to get you your information, and to be able to respond to any follow-ups that we may have prior to in advance of posting for the May 29th meeting. So the purpose of these monthly updates, again, as we wrote into our budget policy, is to give us the information that we need to ensure that we're prepared to approve the budget in time for it to be submitted to the Public Education Department by their June deadline. So it's a team effort there as well. Just another update about the ABCGC, the Albuquerque Bernalillo County Government Commission. See, that wasn't written out here in the notes. As we discussed in the previous meetings, there are efforts underway to add Albuquerque Public Schools as a formal member of this governing commission. And so this will be brought to the board on May 29th during our meeting as well. So we'll consider a resolution that would make APS and 2 of our representatives formal members of this governance alliance. And so this resolution is currently under review by our legal counsel. And again, the Albuquerque City Council and the Bernalillo County Commission are both reviewing and passing similar resolutions. And so just thank you to Member Benavides and to Member Jackson for your work on this so far. It's really exciting to get to sit at the big table, big kids table, big grown-ups table, to get away from the kids table to the grown-ups table. A plug for the New Mexico United game. Have you purchased your tickets for Schools Out Night at the June 8th New Mexico United game?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going
out of town.
Going to?
Go.
Have you purchased your tickets June 8th, Esteban? Come on. I have.
All the cool kids are going to be there.
The cool kids will be there. So just a plug. Please, board members, staff, Albuquerque Journal staff, and others, help us get the word out. This game will highlight APS students and staff, as well as Goal 1, which is our early literacy goal. It'll also serve as another opportunity for the board to engage with the community. So in addition to getting to hang out with us, it's going to be a great night because we're giving out more than 2,000 children's books. HR will have a recruiting table. Dr. Blakey will take part in the ceremonial first kick. Yeah. I'll have a helper. A choir of APS teachers will sing the national anthem. Fortunately, it's not your board singing the national anthem. You're welcome. East San Jose Elementary Baile Folklorico dancers will perform at halftime. The Somos Unidos Foundation will hold a school supply drive for APS students during its tailgate, and $4 of every ticket sold using the APS link will go to the APS Education Foundation. More information is on the APS website. Board members have graphics to share on your socials as well, so please do that. Help spread the word. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I do want to acknowledge that this whole initiative is a result of the board's broader commitment to community engagement. And so I want to thank our ad hoc community engagement committee, which is chaired by Member Jackson, includes Member Astorga and Member Benavides. So thank you for that work. Which in addition to this really cool United game is also, the committee is also working to set goals, to plan future events all the way through the next year, but also to support our outreach. So this is not just us bringing people in to talk to us, but us going out to the community. So please, 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 board members, continue that outreach. And I believe that concludes the president's report. So we will move on to the announcement of the next Board of Education meeting, which is Wednesday, May 15th, 2024 at 5 p.m. And the next special Board of Education meeting is Wednesday, May 29th at 5 p.m. All meetings are held here at the Allison Bruce King Educational Complex at 6400 Uptown Boulevard and live streamed at aps.edu. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.